to everyone here in this cozy atmosphere, very small audience, which I think is maybe not too bad for an intimate reading. First of all, before I would like to start this session, there are a few announcements I have to make. First of all, of course, this is the 4th Jaipur bookmark. We are on the 3rd day. It started one day earlier than the Jaipur Literature Festival. We have, since yesterday, a series running every morning that is called Twice Told Tales. This is also the session for today, Twice Told Tales. And the idea behind this session is to give some more space, some more, some stage to translators, translations, authors, working together with translators, so that we have the possibility to also hear some translations and not only talk about the translations. I have with me for this session, for this Twice Told Tales session, Vivek, Shanbhag and Chandan Gowda, who will be speaking about their respective books, or rather translation of books they made. But before I do that, there's one thing I have to do now. It might take a few minutes to arrange that. We have sponsors for the JBM, and I was asked that I should really mention the sponsors without whom this whole event would not be possible. So the sponsors for the whole Jaipur bookmark are Niogi Books, the Australian government, the Australia Council for the Arts, Guild, HarperCollins Publishers, Westland, Oxford Bookstore, the Spanish government, and there the Acción Cultural Española, Literature Across Frontiers, Sahitya Academy, the Goethe Institute Max Muller-Baumann, Pro Helvetia, Yatra Books, Bani Prakashan, Zuban, and of course, the venue sponsor is Digi Palace, that is hosting JLF, has been hosting the JLF for the past 10 years, and also Bookmark shifted now, after last year, shifted also to Digi Palace. So we are extremely grateful to these sponsors, without whom the whole event would not be possible. I'll briefly introduce our speakers for this session. Just 1 second. So as I said, we have with us, on my left-hand side, Vivek Shanbhag. He writes in Canada. He has published 5 short story collections, 3 novels, 2 plays, and has edited 2 anthologies, including 1 in English. From 2005 to 2012, he published and edited the literary journal Disha Kala. His acclaimed novel Gacha Gocha was published in English in 2015. He was a fall 2016 resident at the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa. On my right, I have with me Chandan Gowda. He has translated U.R. Anantamurti's Bara and edited Theatres of Democracy, selected essays of Shiv Viswanathan. He is presently at work on a book on the culture of development in modern Mysore, and editing a book of English translations of the short fiction of the Kannada writer Purnachandra Tejasvi. He has also directed Sahitya Sahawasa, a series of video lectures of Anantamurti on modern Kannada writers. So thanks to the two of you for being here. I would like to start off with Vivek, and would like to ask him about your novel and of course also about the translation. And before we go into some reading, maybe you can give us some context of how the novel came into being and also the translation came into being.
Thank you, Christoph. I must also, before I start, thank Neeta, who is putting this JBM together for quite a few years now, and it is such an important event, focusing on translation, focusing on books, and focusing on publishing. So thanks, Neeta, for doing this. Yeah, it's very difficult to say from put my finger and say this is the source or this is the inspiration for the book. It is like a river which flows and takes from 1,000 different sources. But there are some things which which I think prompted this. And that experience goes back to nearly 25 years ago. And I was working with a multinational called Unilever, and when I was a management trainee with them, I went on for an extensive sales training, and I spent a lot of time with the salesmen. And some of the details here come from there. And in one of those visits, in a very small place, in a very small town, there were no hotels, so I had to stay with the family. So this was many years ago. And I was surprised to see how much the family was involved in the work of that salesman. Yeah, they even knew the codes of the products that he was selling. So, and that was something that stayed with me. And if you see the change that India has gone through in last 25 years or so after the globalization, the relationship between work and life has significantly changed. And that's something that has also bothered me in very different ways. So I can't say what has come into this, or I'm only saying that in this book, but then some of these things come to my mind. Now this book was published in 2013 in Canada and translated I think in 2015, 2014 or so. It took us, me and Srinath, about a year and a half, end to end, from the time we started till the book came out. Not that entire time was spent on translation, but about a year or so was spent on translation. It was a very enriching experience, because for a writer, when you write in a certain language, there are so many things that you take for granted. Because that is the beauty of the language. Any language, it's not English, any language. Because there are certain things that work in a language. When you use a phrase, it evokes certain memories. When you use a word, it evokes certain memories. So many things are taken for granted. And when you translate it, all these things just fail. Because what you can express in one word requires a sentence, right? And also it could be the other way. But so suddenly you are aware of your strengths as well as weaknesses, and one has to make sure that that is taken care of. So when you translate, again I keep saying this again and again. I think it's very important that we don't translate what is sentence by sentence. In a work, there is always something that is unsaid in it. So one has to translate that unsaid, bring that unsaid from original language into the target language. So that process is that's very important to take care of that. So most of the discussions that I have had with the translator during this process was not about what is the meaning of this word or the meaning of the sentence, but what was the intention. And what were the, if I may say, the tactics or tools that I had used, which I wouldn't share with anyone else, but it's the secrets of the writer. So what were these things, and why did I do this?
But you did share it with the translator.
I did share with the translator, because if I don't do this, then we can't really get this into the language. So it's a very difficult thing. So. And so those were the discussions with him, telling him, how did I put this thing together, and why have I followed a certain sequence, and why have I used a word, repeatedly. So these kinds of things, so that he understands and then recreates that in English. Every sentence of this is in Kannada, right? But I feel these are two different books. Because what you get when you read Kannada is slightly different than what you get in English. Of course, the effort is to give you the same experience, but it's never possible.
And is this difference, does it have to do with what the translator is also bringing in? Or is it only the difference because of the language?
It's because of the language. Because when you read in Kannada, certain things get evoked in your mind. The same phrase even in translation, may not evoke the same feeling when you read it in English. So it is impossible to get the same experience. But of course, we strive to do it, deploy various strategies and try to, sometimes if you don't find an equivalent for a phrase, we create that in English, which probably was not there in that language. That may stand out. Then we'll have to take a view and see whether you should keep it. Is it, will it come in the flow of your experiencing in the work, and so on and so forth.
So, and how closely did you work together with the translator? You said it took like 1.5 years to get the translation done. It's a rather small, thin book, right? So did you like meet on a weekly, daily?
No, this I said end-to-end it took 1.5 years,
yeah.
but it also included some editing and all that. But translation, I think, took us a year, and on and off. It is not that we met regularly. He translated the first chapter, and then we discussed really in detail, and he did it again and again till he got the tone right. Once he got the tone right, then it was easy. Because it's important. See, the positioning, tone is nothing but the positioning of the narrative within a fiction or within any work. So, what does the positioning mean? It means that from that point, there are certain things that you see and certain things you don't see, and which is why that narrative is in a certain way. So he had to get that positioning, so that because of that positioning, I have used certain tones, certain words. So he had to understand it, and once he got it, then it was smooth.
And could you, just one last question, could you just give one example of what was like of something that is extremely difficult, or maybe you want to read of one example that was that it's very difficult to translate because in Canada it's just simply different than how you would express it in English. I mean, if you can think of something.
Yeah, no, I can give you examples. And for example, there is a phrase in Canada which means "bedadingalali kodayaliyo." What it means in English, the translation of that means that when you are rich overnight suddenly, that you hold an umbrella even in the moonlight. Yeah. So you have to explain it in such detail, but it is only 3 words in it, and it has so many things behind that, right? So when you translate it into English, of course you get the meaning, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah, but some kind of like there's a beauty in it, in the three. Yeah. Okay, great. Would you like to read a few passages?
I will read a few passages, and then I will also say a few words after writing. This is the person the narrator has gone to see his wife off at the railway station. I saw her off at the railway station. There was only perfunctory talk between us. "All right, see you," she said when she took her seat in the train compartment. The words sounding like a formality. Neither of us seemed keen on speaking to the other. I remained standing in the compartment for a couple of minutes. Then I thought there wasn't anything to do inside, and so I came out and stood aimlessly on the platform. When I next peeped in through the window, I saw she had already started a conversation with a woman sitting next to her. Anita was wearing a cream-colored sari, her hair gathered in a bun. I wondered at how beautiful she looked in the evening light. We could easily send her home by plane, but she insisted on going by train, that too second class. At least she had agreed to travel in a sleeper compartment. As the train's departure time neared, the bustle on the platform grew more frenzied. I didn't know if Anita had seen me standing outside. I tried to attract her attention from the window. She seemed to glance in my direction, but perhaps not, because she immediately resumed the conversation with her neighbor. The engine sounded its horn, A couple that had arrived at the last minute was scrambling to get into Anita's compartment with far too many bags. I watched them, fascinated, and during that time, the train began to move. I realized I hadn't waved goodbye to Anita and began to walk with the train. She was still engrossed in talking with her neighbor and didn't look towards the window. I ran a few steps as the train gathered speed. Whether she saw me or not, I waved, at least to comfort myself, and stopped. The train went on, leaving me behind. I realized I didn't know when exactly we lost contact. Was it when she began talking to the woman next door? Was she when she began talking to the woman next to her? Or was it when I became engrossed in the couple struggling to board? Or was it at some time before that? It didn't feel like I had hardly seen her off. A feeling came over me of not having done what I had set out to do. And he drops her and then comes home. I reached home. Chikappa had gone somewhere. Appa was out too. No trace of Malati. I was in no mood to talk with Amma, who was watching TV. I rushed upstairs to my room and closed the door. I sat on the bed and the first thing I noticed was the slightly ajar door of Anita's wardrobe. I got up to close it completely, walked across and pushed the door. It didn't move. Some garment was stuck in the crack of the door. I opened the two doors of the wardrobe wide, so I could get rid of the obstruction. A familiar smell washed over me. I lost myself for a second in my own reflection in the mirror on the inside of one of the doors. The tall compartment to the right had her saris arrayed on hangers. On the shelf below were folded tops, salwar kameezes. The locker on the left contained her chains, earrings, bangles. Nothing too expensive. It was all mixed metal. With the exception of her Mangal Sutra, she never wore gold jewelry. I pulled open one of the two drawers. It had some of her certificates and other official looking papers. The other drawer had our wedding album. I flipped through a few of the photographs and replaced the album. Next to it were some papers, some receipts, a scrap with someone's telephone number. I saw a folded newspaper cutting and opened it. It was a death notice of someone named Varasita Lakshmi Shankar. The photo showed a scrawny, middle-aged woman with large eyes. She had died the previous June. There was no information about how she had died. Strange, I didn't remember Anita having mentioned her to me. Must be a relative. My mind was running away in all directions and I composed myself. I had broken into her world when she wasn't around. She would certainly not have approved in her present frame of mind. Still I persisted. I sifted through her jewelry, wrapped a chain of beads around my fingers. I touched her clothes. I rummaged through her papers. I weighed in my palm a pendant cast in the form of the sun. Anita's entire world was contained in that wardrobe. We had not brought anything together after our time in Ooty. I leaned into one of the shelves amidst the clothes and breathed deep. It was a smell I could not identify, but I had come to know it so well. I took a sari and sniffed it. The scent seemed to diminish rather than intensify. It was the same with any garment I picked out of the wardrobe. Whatever fragrance the whole wardrobe had was missing in the individual clothes it had. The more keenly I sought it, the farther it receded. The strange mixture of feelings I could not quite grasp. Love, fear, entitlement, desire, frustration flowed through me until it seemed like I would break. I read this and I also feel that this is, in a way, he's a metaphor for translation. Because, his last act, when he pulls out each of the garments and sniffs it, he doesn't get that smell. Right? He can get it only when he is there, he stands in front of the wardrobe, when it is as a whole. Right? So, I thought I must mention this. It's an interesting
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much for this reading. I would like to go on with Chandan. So you are in this case the translator, and so we have somebody who worked closely together with the translator to get his own work translated. Now, in your case, you translated. You are Anantamurti's Bara. Just for giving us like some context, how did you? I mean, how important was it for you to translate this work? Why did you pick up this work and translate it?
Anantamurti called me one day and said, "This is a story that has not been taken seriously by the critics." He called me one day and said, "This story has been ignored by critics. It's really worth one of the good stories." And that was all. And I read it. I watched the film earlier. The film had done very well. When I read the story, now the story was. I was doing social science at that time. So when I read the story, it felt that the story was it had anticipated just about every theme that had come to seem important in discussions called post-colonial studies. And I was struck by how a body of scholarship had evolved with complete disregard for a similar conversation that had happened much before this body was evolved and in more interesting ways. This got me going. I felt it was a contribution to social theory discussions. So the inspiration was less literary, more theoretical, not scientific, but political theoretical. And I set upon doing it. And it was there, and I had the advantage of having to read out parts of the translated words to him. And it had to sound right. So like Vivek was trying to say, it's very tough. And you're trying all kinds of measures to see if you've succeeded. And it's really a different text. You read it in the original if you want to be fairly blunt about what's happening. But then you try to see if the translators the invisibility demand that the readers make, that you get out of here. Let me just actually write the original. So how does it happen? It's through a series of self-effacing techniques, which unfortunately, which in this case couldn't happen that straightforwardly, because it was a story where you have a character who uses English phrases to tell the other person that he's knowledgeable too. And you had to retain these phrases in English because it was performing as a function of class politics. And you had someone who was using a heavily Sanskritized Kannada, using words like dharma and punya, and meaning that he saw the world differently. And there was no way you could reduce this metaphysical sort of depth that they had to be retained. So allowing for actors who are oriented toward different.
And how did you do it then? Like, how did you
I
solve the problem?
emphasized within conversations, the English phrases that occur as jargon, cliched phrases like a theoretical socialist or a bourgeois progressive. These were retained. In addition, they were italicized. And I have a note in the beginning that explains why I've done this.
So you can actually right from the beginning see that this is also English in the original, or was English in the original.
You have a cliche like criminal disturbance. The police officer says that. And then you can't translate it in Kannada, and I think it's better left that way. And speaking of the form of the story, it's in 10 discrete parts, as it were. Parts of it are discursive, parts of it are descriptive. And it's not the linear story. Sometimes the suspense is taken off the very beginning, the end is three parts of what's happening.
And what was for you? I mean, was that a difficulty for you, or would you say there were in the act of translation there were other difficulties that were even harder for you to manage, or you couldn't even manage? Like in this case, apparently you managed to find a solution around it, which I would also say is your creative contribution to the original, so to say. Was there something where you would say that was almost impossible to solve in the translation?
I tried to work around it. I mean, there's one occasion where I have to split a sentence. It seems very long. Otherwise, no. But you know, these metaphoric substitutions, I was just telling Vivek before the session began. This line would say, Satisha Manasu Kallu Madi. Literally would be made his, it turned his mind into a story. So that became hard. So you have to find out what this similar expression might be. They were fairly easy to find, I must say.
And was Anantamurti happy with the translation in the end? Or what were the phases of translation? Was there a lot of discussion going on? Because apparently you had like a close discussion on what you meant, what like the whole background of the original was to create a better understanding of the translation. How was your interaction in the process of translation?
It was very close. I would call him as and when I needed to. We lived very far, so far. Then I did a reading over afternoon once it was done. The book also includes an interview I did with him after doing the translation, which sort of clarifies what the story significance is and what the difficulty are. So it was finished with his consultation.
You've got like a few bits of the original with you and also the translation, right? You can read from both. Yes. That's what you said. Okay.
I'll just read a short text.
Yeah.
Before I get into this broad brushstroke account of the story, it isn't a story. It's not a just so story. It's packed with details. It's packed with details, and if you came to it with, there'll be a line that will be trying to say Marx was wrong. There'll be a line that will be trying to say Gowda, it has to be taken seriously. But you have to come with that knowledge to appreciate the story. But let's not presume any such thing. You have to read it simply. It's an IAS officer and his wife who mean well, who get themselves transferred to a drought-hit district to be able to do good for people. And you will find many roadblocks and obstacles. That's local politics. So it could be read straightforwardly as the difficulties of doing good in the political system. But it's also about how a certain idealism comes to seem misplaced at the end of the story. An idealism that seems, whose authorities are examined as far as protagonists are concerned. They are sure that they mean well and they know how the world works. But that knowing becomes less and less confident in their own mind. And this happens through a series of snapshot encounters with there's a local farmers leader and a leader of the municipal workers union who's very pragmatic, and you have a cow protector, and you also have an old woman at the very start of the story. So through the IAS officer's encounters with these people, there's a larger realization that he may have erred in arriving at clarity about how the world has to be interfered with. So in a way, it's really a story of modern Indians and the need for them to be clear about the fact that modern frames of understanding don't quite fit neatly. So this is one of those moments where he's going to question himself. He's on his way back from office. There's a gruel distribution center where gruel is being given to the victims of drought. I'll read the Kannada paragraph. ಬೀದಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಗಂಜಿ ಕೇಂದ್ರದ ಎದುರು ಸಾಯಂಕಾಲದ ಆಹಾರಕ್ಕೆಂದು ಸಾಲು ಜನರು. ಸತೀಶ ಕಾರನ್ನು ದೂರದಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸಿ ನಡೆದು ಹೋದ. ತಾನು ಇವರಂತೆ ಹಸಿದವನಾಗಿದ್ದರೆ ಈ ಸಾಲುಗಳ ಮಧ್ಯೆ ತನ್ನ ಗಂಜಿಯ ಸರದಿ ಯೋಚಿಸುತ್ತಾ ನಿರ್ವಿಣ್ಣನಾಗಿ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅಲ್ಯೂಮಿನಿಯಂ ತಟ್ಟೆ ಹಿಡಿದು ಕೂತಿರುತ್ತಿದ್ದ. ಸಾಲಿನ ಹೊರಗೆ ನಿಂತಿದ್ದರಿಂದಲೇ ಇಡೀ ಸಾಲುಗಳನ್ನು ನೋಡುವುದು ಸಾಧ್ಯವಾಯಿತು. ಇಡೀ ಸಾಲುಗಳನ್ನು ನೋಡಬಹುದಾದ್ದರಿಂದಲೇ ತನಗೆ ಹಸಿವು, ಕ್ಷಾಮ, ಜನರ ಮಾನವೀಯತೆ ಹೀಗೆ ಕ್ಷಯಿಸುತ್ತಾರೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ನಿವಾರಿಸಲು ಏನು ಉಪಾಯ ಇತ್ಯಾದಿ ವಿಚಾರಗಳು ಹೊಳೆಯಲು ಸಾಧ್ಯವಾಯಿತು. ಸಾಲಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾದ ಕಣ್ಣುಗಳನ್ನು ಬರಿದೇ ಮುಚ್ಚಿ ಕರೆಯುತ್ತಾ ಕ್ಯೂ ಕೂತ ಯಾರೂ ಈ ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಣಗಿದ ಕಾಲುಗಳನ್ನು, ಕೈಗಳನ್ನು, ಒಣಗಿದ ತುಟಿಗಳನ್ನು ಒದ್ದೆ ಮಾಡಲೆಂದು ಚಾಚುವ ಒಣಗಿದ ನಾಲಿಗೆಗಳನ್ನು ನೋಡುವುದಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದರೆ ತನಗೆ ಕೂಡ ನೋಡಿದ್ದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಗ್ರಹಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವಷ್ಟು ಒಳಗಿನ ಧಾರಣ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಹಿಕ್ಕುತ್ತದೆ ಎಂಬುದು ನಿಜವಲ್ಲ. ಒಳಗೆ ಇರಲಿ ಹೊರಗೆ ಇರಲಿ ಹೊರಟಾಗದೆ ಮಾರ್ಗವಿಲ್ಲ.
I think we can just give you a short round of applause for this one as well. Thank you.
Rows and rows of people waited for their evening meal outside the Gurul Center. Satisha parked his car at a distance and started walking towards them. In a monologue. Had I starved like these people, I'd be holding a aluminum plate along with them and waiting my turn, depressed. It's only because I'm not in the line that I'm able to see all the rows, and therefore I'm able to think about hunger, drought, the waning of humanity, and what I could do to alleviate them. Their eyes swollen and listless, no one in the lines notices the shriveled hands and legs and the parched tongues trying to moisten dry lips. Satisha was not sure if his inner strength could increase to let him understand all that he saw. I have to be tough, both within and without. There is no other way.
You've got another message? Yeah, that's it. Just the time for that message.
I forgot to mention the story is titled Bara. It means drought, it also means non-generativeness, sterility, barrenness. And the story works with all these meanings. One instance to show how a generosity is in the vein. In the evening, when he was preparing to go home, Satisha noticed the cap of his car's petrol tank was missing. The last time this had happened, his PA had checked a scrap shop on a hunch and found the stolen cap amidst pins, belts, naphthalene balls and the like. The scrap shop owner's job was such, assigning young boys to steal cycle dynamos, petrol tank caps, motorcycle keys and so forth. Satisha could have easily sent the shop owner to jail, but that would have left yet another person unemployed. His family members would have become beggars. Satisha had therefore sent 10 rupees to his PA and bought back his petrol tank cap. Should I send my PA or a policeman this time? He sent a policeman.
Thank you. You have another one? Okay, because these are rather short ones, so I think we have time for another one.
It's a bit of a dialogue. Satisha is in his office. There was a sound. Satisha shut his book. Someone was knocking at the door he kept open to let visitors access him directly without going through office procedure. Come in, he said. Tell him, sir. Please tell the peon that this door he wanted everyone to access is open to Bimoji as well. Bimoji's affected manner was to make the peon aware that he was close to Satisha. Noticing it, Satisha spoke with restrained cordiality. Please sit down, Mr. Bimoji. Bimoji pushed back the thick glasses on his nose. He asked sardonically, hasn't our SP Sahib come to see you yet? Satisha was surprised that news of his order to search Gangadhar Swami's Gowda had already reached Bimoji. Unwilling to yield to his inquisitiveness, Satisha replied, but I wasn't expecting to hear from him. Please forgive my impudence. Our district minister Rudrappa and his follower, our SP Sahib, consider Gangadhar Swami the most innocent and incorruptible leader of this district. Will you share my lunch, Mr. Bimoji? Thanks. Gangadhar Swami has distributed Hudiyan and Paisa among the children of our street today. This is the politics the supporters of your government play against me. Satisha took out his lunch box from the desk drawer and opened it. Inside it were a couple of chapatis, an omelette, and slices of raw tomatoes. His friends from the Air Force had brought the tomatoes and eggs from either Bangalore or Hyderabad. Slightly embarrassed, Satisha passed the chapati, half an omelette, and a few tomato slices to Bimoji. Miss Bimoji, tell me, what can I do to get this district declared drought head? Bimoji wiped his thick moustache with his shirt sleeve and laughed derisively. Sir, I know your biodata. My grandfather was a tailor in your town. I've heard that our country's famous leftist theoretician, Jayan, is your brother-in-law. I've read his much discussed article. What we now have is a progressive bourgeois government. It will have to destroy the feudalism in our country for its own good. All the leftists must therefore cooperate with this government. Isn't this his thesis? After I learned that Jayan was your brother-in-law, I understood why you have joined the IAS. Please don't consider Bimoji a fraud or that.
So, I would come back to both of you. Before I want to open this discussion up also for some questions from the audience, my interest would be a question to both of you. So in this case, you have translations from Kannada into English. How do you, what is the importance of translating into English? What is the importance of translating into other Indian languages? Are these texts available in other Indian languages? And what is, for example, the importance also, I'm from Germany, what is the importance of also bringing these texts to even other countries in the world and other languages in the world? So maybe Vivek, if you have anything to share.
From the perspective of an Indian writer, I think it is very important that I would consider it most important that my work gets translated into other Indian languages. And it is because the experience that one gets, we talked about the experience, how it shifts when you translate into English. The experience that one gets when you translate from one Indian language into another is much closer than what you do in English. And there's a reason for it. The structure of the language, Indian languages, most of the languages, I think almost all, is that the verb is at the end of the sentence. While in English it's the other way. And for a writer, when you construct a sentence, it is the way the mind works and the way the reader reads it is, you go through a series of descriptions or context. And when you read, your eye is looking for that verb to make sense of that sentence. So the mind works in a certain way, and the writer knows this. And I know that how long I can hold the attention of my reader, and what are the ups and downs I take in or her through my sentence before I show her the verb. But this is completely lost in English, and that's why it is very difficult. Because to get that experience, because what happens is, there's certain things I want to show, certain things I want the reader to pause, and then understand the sentence. So that is one of the most difficult things when you translate into English. But in Indian languages, because the structure is the same, the experience that one can get is very close to the original. So for me, it is important that it gets translated into other Indian languages. This particular book is getting translated into many languages, and there is some initiative called YALI, which is driven by Ashia, who is here. So I think now it's in some 5-7 languages. It's getting done, and some others will be published. It's also I think now will soon be in some of the European languages as well. But unfortunately, in European languages, it has to go through English. Even in some of the Indian languages, like for example in Bangla, there is no one who can translate from Kannada into Bangla directly. So one has to go through English. So it's difficult, but then it is inevitable, right?
Yeah, what you mentioned just regarding the verb in the end of the sentence, that's something that's very interesting, because in German language you have compound verbs where also the first part is in the first part of the sentence, and then it ends up like Mark Twain said, the German language is like diving. You just jump into the water and you come up in the end of the sentence and you never know where you end up. So only in the end it's revealed what the whole sentence is about. So I could imagine that even a translation into German could work if there was somebody who could actually do it, who would be so fluent in Canada to actually translate it into German directly.
There is other thing which is again very specific to Kannada. I think it's also in other languages. I'm not very sure. That the tense that you use in English, it has to be very definite. In Kannada, it can be one can keep it vague, and the writer who knows this uses it very effectively. That is lost when you translate. So it is. In many times we have faced this while translating this. It has to be absolutely correct. There is no ambiguity allowed in English about the tense, right? So that's another challenge that we have.
Okay, just to pass on the same question to you. I mean, was the importance for you to translate this into English? And I assume there are other translations into other Indian languages already in existence.
It's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
I won't be surprised if it's. So like I said, I had the academic community in mind when I did this, and it seems to have acquired some attention. We have to wait to see what happens. If I can share a private, something more fact. When I read Spivak's translation of Mahashwara Devi's breast jiva, she uses that as an allegory of the exploitative relation between the first and third world. And even then I knew this was a gross reductionism of how things work. And I thought this was an allegory of how Western reason and its others are there in the world. And if the IAS officer is an educated Indian who embodies that secular thought, he's running into a phenomenon that challenges him at every step. There's a water diviner who knows what the water source is without ever having done engineering of any kind. And Satisha himself hankers after the non-mediated relationship with the world. And in the interview, he says, yes, alternatives to suffering can exist, and it has to be sought through discarding everything you know. So there's all of this going on, and I really hope the social science community or the humanities community picks it up for its potential. It's actually an extraordinary proposition to rethink the various ideological dead ends we have reached in political life, which is why I think the story sort of seems even more contemporary than it might have in the late 70s. And it's just a few months in the result, we'll have to see its reception.
I mean, yeah, English language as such is, of course, very good to distribute and to bring it out into the world. And I think Spivak, as like an advocate of Indian languages, actually, she also translates it into English, I think, for the same reason that she says, I want that more people can read this this work. So in that sense,
but she did this in Colombia, which makes a world of a difference.
Yeah.
So we have to see.
I would open up this discussion to the audience, so maybe we can pass on one mic to, if anybody's there. There's a question, for example, here. Share the mic.
Thank you for that. That was really interesting. My question is around the untranslatability of Ghachar Ghochar. I don't know if you've discussed this already because I missed a little bit of the beginning. But I mean, firstly, thank you for that phrase because my friends and I know use it all the time for tricky situations. Just I think like it's a very handy phrase to have. But as a translator, I was wondering, and what I really enjoy about translation is actually trying to convey the same pun or the same sort of phrase in another language, and I do it between Hindi and English. But actually, if I was to think about it, I would not like to have translated Ghachar Ghochar. There's something almost sacred about that phrase, which should remain like that in Hindi, in any other Indian language that comes out. So I'm just wondering, and you also as a translator, how do you deal with those untranslatable phrases? How do you take those decisions between, translating or just leaving them as they are?
You're right. Ghachar Ghochar it cannot be translated, and even the US edition, which will come out in a couple of weeks from now, has retained the title, and similarly the edition in UK also has retained the title because it's a nonsense word, and it can't be translated.
this book I read out from retained the Kannada word too, because it's multivalent. It's brownness, barrenness, it's non-generativeness, which if you chose any one of them, it would foreclose the other possibilities. So the idea is to push you to think what it might mean. And someone reminded me that other novels of Anant Pankaj are also there. Samskara and Bhava, Divya. So retaining the title is more easily done than the words inside the text. There, it's really a judgment you need to make. The character is a guna, swabhava. I think you could translate them as quality and character without feeling very guilty. But if you're saying punya, and if you made that religion, or if you made that blessing, I think that substitution seems less powerful, less acceptable. And I suppose, there's some people will tell you, it's a lovely translation, it doesn't read like. And I feel it has to read like, even when it's being smooth. And the sense of the particularity of the world being translated from has to be retained in ways that doesn't jar the reading, but the reader ought to know that it's there for a reason. And this you're doing at every step. You should try translating.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I slightly differ on this. When I write in Kannada, I want my reader to experience it absolutely smoothly. In the sense, when I say smooth, I want her or him to go through a certain emotions and reading experience, which I decide, right? Because of choosing the words and the sentences and situations and so on and so forth. The same thing has to happen in English, and I don't want to put any obstacles of the language in between. It does not mean I don't want the reader to understand the flavor of the language or whatever it is. But it should not be clumsy. It should because it is. I have done translations into Kannada from other English and other languages into Kannada. And when I do that as a writer, I spend so much time to make sure that it must read like excellent Kannada word, knowing that it is like a Tamil word or it is an English word, but it must read as good. I can't make it clumsy. I can't make it just to give that flavor. That's not the way to bring that flavor. Is my view. The way to bring that flavor, there are other 15 different ways of doing it, and not in making it difficult for the reader to, or making it bring in something which is alien to the track, which stops you, which takes away your attention. Because as a writer, you hold the attention of the reader, and you don't want that attention to go anywhere else. It has to stay there. And you put a word or put a phrase which is which takes away that attention, I think the experience is lost.
As always, I'm advocating the middle of the road position. I think you can retain things without being clumsy, without affecting the reader too much. You can't have a liberal sprinkling of these things, really. But let me even share with you my greatest fear about what happens when you use English. You may end up making your characters seem like they're from a liberal society. Liberal society in the sense that individuals you run into it. How do you somehow prevent that from happening? I suppose you could do it without retaining italics too. But I think when someone is saying, for example, there's a metaphysical density of the word can get thinned out if you say religion, I feel. That's why I have retained some of those words. But I would not be in favor of doing it too often. It's really not even a never a decision. It's about the text. You have to see what the text is doing before you can decide these things.
Thank you so much. There are a lot more questions I see, but the thing is, we have to end this session. It was a lovely conversation, and we could continue it. So maybe you can approach the two of them outside and ask your questions there. I would like to thank you very much, Vivek and Chandan, for this extremely interesting discussion and reading. And for the audience, thank you for being here. And we continue with our program in 15 minutes with the next program point, which is 10 out of 10 reading South Asia in translation. Thank you very much to all of you.